Good evening, and we are back. One of the hottest topics that's going on today with our farmers on the outskirts of Delhi trying to protest, and with all our Jawans at the borders who are trying to fight our adversaries. A very good slogan had come up: the Jai Jawan Jai Kisan, victory to the soldier, victory to the farmer. The contribution to India by the farmer and the soldier is epitomized in this popular slogan. Today, as the soldiers defend the frontiers against belligerent adversaries and terrorism, the farmers' agitation is also sharply in focus. The support for two evergreen sons of the soil has always been visible and vocal. Media diversions and as Jawan and Kisan ring loud and clear from the Galwan to Jantar Mantar. Even today, almost 80% of Indians live on farms and have close ties to the land. Throughout history, militaries have depended upon these communities to provide rugged, tough individuals who can endure the stress and have the qualities of aggression. Is this changing in the armed forces, where the military requires educated soldiers who might not have these attributes? Those countries rise where their people and the military endure more than their inimical neighbors. How does the Indian soldier match up to the Pakistani and the Chinese?
To discuss this topic, we have on our panel Mr. Manpreet Singh Badal. Mr. Manpreet Singh Badal is an Indian politician and leader of the Indian National Congress, a thoroughbred gentleman and an army man at heart, and a genuine supporter of the armed forces. His dream once was to join the army, but we presume destiny had other designs for him. Currently holding the office of the Finance Minister of Punjab, he has been a member of the Punjab Legislative Assembly 5 times, in 1995, in 1997, 2002, 2007, and 2017, and he has been the Finance Minister twice. His first stint as Finance Minister was in the government led by Prakash Singh Badal from 2007 to 2010. This is his second stint as Finance Minister. He has presented the Punjab budget a record 8 times, the maximum for any minister in Punjab.
Gul Panag, our second panelist. Gul was Miss India in 1999 and is known as a thinking actor. She's also a producer, entrepreneur, and a frontline advocate and an activist who regularly engages and facilitates dialogue and debates on critical issues of gender equality and justice, environmental issues, fundamental rights, secularism, corruption, and political accountability. Gul also runs the foundation, Colonel Shamsher Singh Foundation, that works towards promoting citizen government partnerships towards gender equality, addiction awareness, education, employment, and disaster management. She's won acclaim for her roles in winning awards, nominations, and adulations for films like Sikandar, Ab Tak Chappan, Fatso, Dor, Manorma, and recently seen in the popular serial Patallo. She, an adrenaline junkie who loves great outdoors and adventure sports. She's won many state and national level debating competitions, including gold medals twice at the annual National Inter-University Debate. She was the Aam Aadmi Party candidate from Chandigarh for 2014 Lok Sabha elections.
The moderator for this panel is Mr. Manish Tiwari. Mr. Tiwari was the president of the National Student Union of India from 1988 to 1993 and Indian Youth Congress from 1998 to 2000. He is a member of the Indian National Congress. He successfully contested in the 2009 Lok Sabha elections, was a member of parliament from 2009 to 2014. He also held the office of Minister of Information and Broadcasting from 2012 to 2014. Mr. Tiwari, an advocate by profession, presently practices in the Supreme Court of India and the High Courts of Delhi as well as Punjab and Haryana. As a member of parliament, he has been active in drafting a private member's bill to bring the intelligence agencies under parliamentary oversight. Over to the panel now.
Thank you very much for those very elaborate introductions. May I welcome the Honorable Finance Minister of Punjab, Mr. Manpreet Badal, and the ever versatile, talented, and dynamic Gul Panag. I think we perhaps have a very critical subject to discuss over the next 1 hour. If I think that should be enough time for all of us. Let me just try and structure this particular interaction. I'll begin by asking one or two or three questions, or posing a few questions, and then I would ask Mr. Badal to possibly give an opening statement for about 10 minutes, and then I'll request Gulpanak to do the same, and then we'll take it from there and see as to how the debate evolves. So the three questions that I have, and it's indeed extremely invigorating that we have the Honorable Finance Minister of Punjab with us. Is the union government trying to address a problem through the farm bills, which they are even petrified of talking about openly? And that problem is the huge hole in the union budget. The reason why I say that is because going back to 2016-17, the NDA BJP government decided to move food subsidy as an off-budget item. Till about 2014, the food subsidy component of the union budget was substantially funded as a budgetary item. But I guess when the economy started going into a tailspin post demonetization, they decided that they would reduce the food subsidy component in the budget. Actually ask FCI, the Food Corporation of India, the procuring instrumentality, to really take loans from the National Small Savings Fund, thereby window dressing the fiscal deficit. And as things stand today, the FCI has run up a debt of about 3.5 lakh crores projected to the 31st of March 2021. So my first question for the panel would be that, is the government really trying to address the problem through these farm bills, which they are not even willing to talk about or even acknowledge to the nation? My second question to the panel would be, given that this region is heavily militarized, going back to 1870, when the British government, the imperial crown, introduced the martial arts theory and recruited very heavily from Delhi all the way up till Khyber Pass. And given the fact that this region, Punjab, Haryana, Western Rajasthan, and even Himachal Pradesh, parts of Jammu, contribute very heavily to the Indian armed forces, notwithstanding the recruitable, the male recruitable population policy which was put in place in 1966. This region, in fact, gives, if I can use the word, a very, very proportionate contribution in terms of human resource to the Indian Army, or to the Indian Armed Forces. So do these farm bills, given the intrinsic linkage between an agrarian economy and its contribution to the Indian Armed Forces, do these farm bills really have an implication beyond the economy? And my third question to the panel would be that, unfortunately, we have a disturbed situation on the northern border. We have the Chinese who are currently in occupation of Indian territory. It's disputed as to what is the exact extent and quantum of that transgression. We've almost seen a kind of an information squeeze by the government of India with regard to the facts of this transgression. We also have a situation in Kashmir post the abrogation of Article 370, which cannot really be called tranquil or normal by any stretch of the word, what normalcy means. And if Punjab was to also, unfortunately, God forbid, get disturbed, how would that really play out qua our Western neighbor, given the fact that we've had a brush with terror and militancy for 15 years, which claimed a lot of innocent lives, and Pakistan is always present to fish in troubled waters. So with these three opening questions, may I hand over the floor to the Honorable Finance Minister of Punjab, Mr. Manpreet Badal, to make his opening statement. Manpreet ji, over to you.
Thank you, Manish ji, and my greetings to Gul Penag as well. And Manish, when you speak about the farm bills, I would actually put food security of India and the national security on par. And I would say food security because with a population of about 1.3 billion people, God forbid if there was a harvest failure, and even if you had money in your pocket, there are not enough food stocks floating around in the world to be able to feed 1.3 billion people. So why do you maintain an army? Because you don't use the military every day. You don't have to. Why do we spend so much money on military hardware? We haven't since Kargil actually fought a war with any other nation. It's precisely why we need to maintain buffer stocks in food grains as well. So this is actually extremely disturbing for a country of the size of India. And I was thank you for sharing your article with me this morning. And I went through the way you have very lucidly tried to highlight that how this whole farm bill is actually because of the debt which the FCI has run up. And if I what my figures say that by the end of the financial year in March, it will be almost 6 lakh crores. And in the last, I think 7 years or 6 years, I mean, there used to be in the budget two kind of subsidies. One was the oil subsidy. That has gone now because they've linked prices of oil to international markets. And they have not paid FCI for the last 6 or 7 years. And that is why the FCI has run such a big bill. And so that is the worrying part, that this was something which has served India so well for the last 50 years. Why do we need to tinker with it? And especially the fact that if you in the last month or a month and a half back, if you read, there was a survey out on the World Hunger Index, and out of the 107 odd countries, India was 94th. And I remember when I was a young student in England, and this is in the mid 80s, there was a famine in Ethiopia, and all the biggest bands in the world, the music bands, had got together to organize something called the Band Aid. That was for Ethiopia. And I was surprised that even Ethiopia, in terms of hunger, has done better than India. So this is, of course, people are concerned, and especially in Punjab, that when people in India are actually going hungry, even though we sit on mountains of food grains, but it's just the capacity of people not to be able to purchase that the kind of nutrition. An average Indian is still malnourished. And what is the PDS system which is delivering food grains? They deliver each citizen who's below a certain average of income is allowed 5 kilograms of food grains every month. And 5 kilograms would work out to be about 20 rupees a kilogram. So which makes it 100 rupees. And if the government of India or any government is not capable of even giving 100 rupees to citizens who cannot feed themselves, I don't think so they have the right to call themselves a government. And as far as your question concerning the Chinese belligerence on our northern borders and how it could affect the morale of the Indian army, you'll have to believe me that the Indian army is far too professional to be affected by this. And especially, because it's, young kids, when they go to the regimental centers, the kind of training which is given to them and how they are kind of shaped up. I don't think so. This agitation, I would not put too much this thing. My concern would not be on the morale of the Indian army. But having said that, definitely, and since 1857, that's how the Indian army has shaped up. Because before 1857, the Mughals had a different kind of an army. It was a lot of Afghans, Uzbeks, Uzbek horsemen, Hindu Rajputs, and that was. But after 1857, and especially after the mutiny of India, it was the Sepoy army was disbanded, and then a lot of recruitment started taking place from the northern region of India. I think one of the finest books you can read on the subject, and which actually got me interested in military history, because I was doing a very dull and a drab subject called law when I was a student. But my roommate, who happened to be studying at King's College, he was doing military history. And, by chance, I just picked up his, because my books were boring. Military history books were very interesting. And the first book I picked up was a book written by an Englishman called Philip Mason. And the title of the book was A Matter of Honor. He's written two very good books. One is The Men Who Ruled India. And in that, he argues that why would a Jawan or a soldier fight for, a fight under the colors of a different government, who's not even Indian, who were paid for by a foreign government, and why would he give up his life? And why would scores of actually soldiers give up their lives to retrieve maybe a wounded body or a dead body of a British soldier? And then he comes to the conclusion, just a matter of honor. People in Punjab, because of geography, because of history, we just happen to be on the path of invasions. And people, and especially the farmers who from North India, not just Punjab, but all over North India, because culturally and historically we're part of battle. So let me just share a small, two anecdotes. One, of course, was the famous Battle of Saragarhi, when the Afghans had besieged a small Indian outpost on the borders of what was then Afghanistan in British India. And the Subedar of the small military post, he was called out by the Afghan commander, and he was told by him that, we have no enmity with you. Our fight is against the British. And we would be very happy, and I'll be very happy to actually swear on the Quran that if you just give up this post to the Afghans and you can walk back to Punjab, you just have to give up your weapons and we will not hurt you. And what the Subedar or the Havaldar, he was actually a Havaldar, what he told the Afghan, of course, he spat on the ground. He said, "Do you think we are here because we are we get paid, by the British. हम उनका नमक खाते हैं. हम अंग्रेज का we are not here in this post because, we are, paid by the British, but we are here because we are defending Bharat Mata. We are defending our country, and we are defending our families. We are defending our land. We are defending our children. And this can only come, from someone who's rooted in the soil, who was rooted in this country. And over the years, this tradition of young people, and especially Punjab, has had the privilege of guarding India's fine and ancient civilization for thousands of years. And over the centuries, Punjab has sent our finest sons in the face of great danger to defend the honor and dignity of this nation. And all these, all over the centuries, what we've never asked anything in return, except to be able to, enough land to be able to bury those sons who did not come back. And even after the partition of India and Pakistan, the militaries of both countries have continued with the same tradition. And there's a very interesting anecdote. Once I went to Punjabi University at Patiala, and there was this very famous Punjabi laureate. Her name was Mrs. Tivana, Dalip Kaur Tivana. And this was at a Punjabi cultural festival or something, and she was giving a lecture. And there's there's one incident which I've never been able to forget. She said in this 1971 war, there was fierce battle which took place in the Sialkot sector, and it came down to a hand-to-hand fight between the two militaries. And there was an Indian major and a Pakistani captain who were, in a hand-to-hand combat. And the Pakistani captain was injured in his leg, so he fell down. And the Indian major pulled out his pistol to shoot him. But then he read the badge of the Pakistani captain, and it said, Captain Tivana. And by that time, the Pakistani captain had looked at the badge of the Indian major, and it said, Major Tivana. So the Indian major gestured to the Pakistani that you get up. Probably he had realized that his life had been spared. And he told him that, just leave. You can go back. And the Pakistani captain actually took out his pistol and offered the Indian major his pistol, as a souvenir. And he took the pistol, and Mrs. Dalip Kaur Tivana actually said, how I know about the incident was that Major Tivana was my brother. And that pistol actually sits in our house. It's encased in a glass casing. So, farming families, probably the same tribes, fighting for the honor of their own countries, now different countries. But, ever since the British organized the Indian military into, what was then called as the martial races. But having said that, Punjab has, in spite of our size and population, our contribution to the Indian subcontinent, whether in agriculture or in military, has been completely disproportionate to our size and population. And even today, since I think 69 or 68, they started recruitment on what is called, the pro rata male recruitable, something. Even though Punjab is now a little less than 2% of India's population, yet even today, our contribution is about 8% to the Indian Armed Forces, down from 20% from the British times. So there's a tradition of soldiering, and this, of course, comes from values which, rural people, especially this carries on from generation to generation. And I hope that some of the veterans from Punjab, and sometimes I look at the honors list of people who've received medals for gallantry, and it really makes me proud when I see that Punjab not only is the #1 state in that honors list, but the second state of India, which is Uttarakhand, is not even half of Punjab. So that is the kind of contribution which Punjab has made. I hope we can carry this on in our generation and in the generations to come. And Punjab should be known as, what in Punjab we call the sword arm of India, and also the breadbasket of India. So that would be my opening statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manpreet ji. May I
I'm sorry I was a little long-winded.
No, that's all right. That's all right. We have the time. May I go across to Gul Panag ji? The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Manish ji. And it was a pleasure to listen to you speak, Mr. Badal. I think enough has already been spoken by Mr. Badal on the subject of the economic necessity or the economic compulsion of why these 3 farm laws were brought in. And one doesn't really want to use this forum to go into the politics of it. And also, I think, Mr. Badal has spoken very, very eloquently on the contribution of the northern states to the armed forces. I want to actually use this opportunity to talk about the crossroads that we find ourselves at today, and how Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, the 2 groups of people, the sanctity of these 2 groups of people who have contributed so much to nation building today is really raising some very, very important issues. When Lal Bahadur Shastri coined this term, Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, it was to highlight the contribution of the Kisan and the Jawan to nation building. And the last many decades are proof of the sweat and blood that the Kisan and the Jawan have put in. Today, I think the crossroad, which, in fact, at the risk of repeating myself, the crossroad at which we find ourselves as a result of this farmer protest. And again, I'm going to completely stay away from the politics of the protest or the perceived politics, but I want to focus on talking about the questions and issues it actually raises, Manish ji. I think firstly, it forces us to look at the value of the legislative process and whether or not the same can be circumvented, whether it can be navigated through the process of ordinances and bills that are passed by voice vote by a government that enjoys majority in both houses. The second thing that I want to actually talk about is what it means for reform. And because a large part of the audience that we have here is from a military background, let's also be very clear that reform is something that is needed both by the Jawan and by the Kisan. For a country that has geopolitical ambition and aspirations, and rightly so, reform of the armed forces is very, very important. And as somebody who comes from a farming family and an armed forces family, I think it'll be very, very, very an opportune time to say that all of us farmers definitely want reform. I don't think anybody is a status quoist. But what has also come to the fore in the last few months is the manner in which reforms have come to be passed, how consensus, how consultations with concerned citizens or subject matter experts or those who are going to be affected by reform are given short shrift. When it comes to agrarian reform, I think there's no doubt that there is reform needed. Now, I don't want to go into the economics of it because Mr. Badal has adequately elaborated on the manner in which procurement is done, whether we have surplus grain, the FCI's bills are being paid. I'm going to stay away from that. But what I want to really talk about is that it's this part of the country, largely Punjab and Haryana, has taken India from being grain insufficient, rather from we had a huge food grain scarcity to food grain surplus. And that was also a result of adopting agrarian reform in terms of the techniques of agriculture. And today, if we are to speak about reforms, I think it's important to take into account the fact that we are a welfare state, and the poster child that the rest of the world tries to follow when it comes to free market reforms and market-driven forces that operate in these free economies, the United States has demonstrated adequately over the last couple of decades that laissez-faire is dead, even in the United States. And the largest subsidy given to farmers the world over is given by the United States. And the reason for that is perhaps because, as Mr. Badal said before me, food is something which is at par with national security. Food security is at par with national security. You can't control the climate. You don't know what's coming next. And which is why at some level there has to be a security net woven around produce. And also, if market forces were to dictate and decide prices of food grain, then we would be in a situation where the farmer would always suffer. So yes, I think there's a very clear understanding that reform is needed. Similarly, I feel reform is needed in the military, and I think everybody watching would agree, because everybody here who belongs to military family or not sees India as a huge geopolitical power in the years to come, but for which we need reform. But how is the reform to be brought about? The third thing that I want to speak about is the role of pressure groups in a democracy. Now, traditionally, for those of us who have a political science background, the role of a pressure group is to try and effect change or to influence decision-making at the political level. What we've seen is that in this case, and again, I'm referring to the present impasse that we're seeing, that the farmer and the soldier are almost together in this pressure group, trying to ask for what they feel is their right, A, in terms of their constitutional right to protest, and B, in whatever demands they may make. The other thing that this has revealed, Manishji, and you, as somebody who comes from a legal background, and as does Mr. Badal, would be very interesting to note the questions this throws up in front of us of the right to legal remedy. And I think that, for me, is something that's worth examining, because the language of these bills, and again, this is not about these bills, it's really about the issues and the questions this has actually brought to the front. That are we in a democracy where we can frame laws where the executive has the power to be judge, jury, investigator, prosecutor, and executor? It's an important question to ask, because it's not about this. It's not about this particular set of laws, but it's the precedent it's likely to set. And most importantly, I think what it means for our public discourse. Now, the right to dissent is essential to a democracy, but no one likes dissent. I don't like when my 2.5-year-old son dissents against me, but fortunately, we don't have a democracy at home. I don't think anybody likes dissent when in an environment that they would like to control, but for governments in democracies, the right to dissent is a bitter pill that they must swallow. Now, coming back to Jai Jawan and Jai Kisan, and why I think this has come to a critical milestone in our public discourse, because governments that enjoy the kind of majority that the present government enjoy have a very low tolerance threshold for dissent and protest. And typically in the past, we've seen over the last 3 odd years that there has been a labeling of anybody who is a dissenter, be it anti-national, urban Naxal, and so on and so forth. Now, there is nobody, let's be very clear, there's nobody more loyal than a soldier. But a soldier, once he relinquishes his service and relinquishes his uniform, is somebody who is entitled to his social and political views. Now, when this soldier is out there protesting for whatever may be the case, again, staying away clearly from the politics of the bills, but to label such a soldier in any manner, and particularly, something which is in the space of anti-national, I think is extremely disturbing, because as Mr. Badal said before me, and as you have said, Manishji, the farming belts of India send a huge number of their soldiers, their sons as soldiers, to the armed forces. Now, while you may have people who were either former soldiers who are now farmers in entirety, or those people who are on the side of the barricade, which has people donning the uniform, essentially they belong to the same community, the agrarian community. And when you come to Punjab in specific, you have a martial people. I mean, Punjabis are largely martial people, which is why even today, since we have mixed troops in the armed forces, we still have 8% of the armed forces as people from Punjab. But they're all essentially farmers. They all come from farming families. So what does that mean for our public discourse? Is there a lesson to draw from our public discourse here, that can you just label everybody and anybody as an anti-national, for example, or as somebody who is potentially committing treason against the state, because dissent is now being equated to treason at some level without actually going to the legal definition of it. So I think for me, the Jai Jawan Jai Kisan slogan and what it's come to stand in today's time, and the questions it raises in front of us, and those questions we must confront, and it's not something we should wish away, because I think these questions really raise very, very, very critical issues, and unless we address them and acknowledge their existence, it may not augur well either for us who are part of the farming and military community, or for the whole nation at large. So really, this would be my opening piece with regard to Jai Jawan and Jai Kisan. And again, since you did mention that there is, we have a external crisis brewing in the form of what's happening in Eastern Ladakh. I don't want to comment on the loss of territory or not, because I'd like to keep that away from this particular conversation. But I think we would all agree that we would want to be the preeminent power in the subcontinent. And if we are to get there, we would need significant armed forces reform. And to acknowledge how this reform is to be brought about, and if the past few sets of reforms are any indication of how reforms are to be done, then is that the way forward? I mean, I really want to leave you all with these questions on our legislative process, on the need for reform and how reform has to be brought forward, the right to legal remedy, and most importantly, what today Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, a slogan coined to unite these two groups of people, and now almost being used to sort of divide these two very groups of people who have contributed the maximum to nation building. So these are the questions that I'd like to leave you with in my opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Gulji. No, I think both Manpreet ji and you have raised extremely germane questions, which obviously need to be addressed, and they are a part of the larger thematic constitutional debate, which unfortunately has not taken place in this country. But before I come to those specific issues, you see, there is another dimension of these farm bills which nobody really has focused their attention very much on. The fact is that it is open-ended public procurement of certain commodities, which allows the government to service the National Food Security Program, which is a statutory legal enactment. The open-ended procurement combined with the minimum support price and the National Food Security Act form a social safety net for almost 65% of people who are dependent on agriculture for their livelihoods. Of course, all procurement is not done at a minimum support price. There are 28 or 29 commodities which are in that list. But since those are the staple commodities which people essentially use in order to feed themselves, there is the dimension then of the National Food Security Act. So essentially, if government is going to hand over or wants to hand over procurement to public players, to private players, notwithstanding their protestations to the contrary, then if government does not procure or the share of government's procurement keeps declining, essentially, how would they fund or how would they service their commitments under the National Food Security Act? So, is this also a design whereby the National Food Security Act is sought to be rendered as a dead letter in the years to come, which essentially means that about 36.4% of India's population, which is poor, maybe not below the poverty line, but poor going by international definitions, would be deprived of this particular form of food security, which I think is essential for them to hold their body and soul together. So I think this is a dimension which we really need to explore in the public space. That what are the other implications of these farm bills? Number two, when you talked about the value of the legislative process, unfortunately, when we enacted the 10th schedule with the best of intentions, we threw out the baby with the bathwater. While the objective was laudable in order to try and correct or mitigate the menace of defections, the IR arms and GR arms, it has essentially taken democracy out of the legislative institutions. So no longer do people or legislators and parliamentarians have the privilege or the liberty of being able to vote according to their conscience, their constituency, and their common sense. So what you find is a whip-driven tyranny. If you are on the treasury benches, you vote for a bill. If you're on the opposition benches, you invariably end up voting against a bill. One of the first things that I did when I went to Parliament was actually do a private member's bill, which sought to limit the anti-defection law only to those instrumentalities which impact the stability of a government. Finance, no confidence motions, finance bills, adjournment motions, etc. There are about 3 or 4 items whereby if the government loses, then the government has to resign. Unfortunately, of course, that effort went nowhere because I don't think it suits leaderships across the political process to really lose that control. But I think that is something that we should really talk about, because in the case of the farm bills, and even before that, you've seen a complete subversion of the legislative process, especially the manner in which legislation has been enacted. Number two, when you talk about reform, about the role, I think it eventually comes down to how broad a consultation do you carry out with stakeholders who are going to be impacted by that process. And unfortunately, we've seen that both at the level of the union government and even at the level of state governments, that broader process of consultation outside the legislative and the executive sphere becomes a casualty. While Government of India actually has a pre-legislative consultative policy, it is followed more in the exception than in the breach. So therefore, I'll turn the floor back to Manpreet ji with these 3 additional questions, and also some of the issues which Gul Panag ji has raised, to get your thoughts on them. Over to you, Manpreet ji.
Thank you, Manish. And before I answer any of your questions, may I just compliment Gul Panag? There are the 2 institutions in India which have really held India together, and actually, the unity of India has been actually, these are 2 institutions. One is the military Indian Army, of course, and one is the Bombay film industry. You people have done more for the cause of India than any other institute, any prime minister, any president of India could ever do. Not many people, Manish, would even remember that when India went to war with China and we needed to double the size of our army, it was employees of the Punjab government in 1962 that 30% of the entire bureaucracy of Punjab, whether it was nurses, doctors, clerks, officers, policemen, 30% of our employees just left Punjab government employment to be able to join the defense services. And Mr. Kairon was then the chief minister of Punjab. And the retirement age in Punjab used to be 55 years because there was nobody left to serve the civilian government, that we had to raise our retirement age from 55 to 58. So, that's the kind of jazba which is there in Punjab towards and the people of for the defense forces and for the love for this motherland. And of course, not just the defense forces, even in the entire independence struggle. I mean, Punjab was one place where the germs of Indian freedom, they grew the fastest. When I was growing up as a young child in rural Punjab, I used to always imagine that one day India will also take its rightful place amongst the community of nations as an honorable member. And for that, if we could, become, like people talk about today, a $6 trillion economy. If our per capita income goes up from $2,100 to $6,000, then we become a meaningful society. Manish, when I was in a boarding school in Dehradun, and we used to go to our science classes, in chemistry class, we were taught that if you boil water at 100 degrees centigrade, it'll become steam. And that is science. And science is exact. Ye nahi ki Bhagwan ki kripa hogi to yes, steam banega. That was science. Similarly, statecraft, or politics, which we call. Statecraft is actually also a science. That if you do A, B, C, then, the country is bound to go up. X, Y, Z, there is no question of the country progressing. So in my view, even on agriculture and the farm bills, one, of course, would be that if the contribution of agriculture in Punjab towards our economy is 20%, but if 60% people are engaged in agriculture, then obviously, if 20 people were engaged, in producing 20% of our GSDP, then they would be doing fine. But if 60% are involved in trying to earn 20 rupees, then obviously they are not going to be well off. And in our quest, we were told that, food security is as important as national security. And Punjab became the breadbasket of India. And over the decades, we have poisoned our soils. We have depleted our natural water aquifers. And I don't remember Punjab actually being the recipient of any major project from Government of India. And if I could even talk about, petty politics on this show, which I didn't want to, but you'd be surprised that, we've just been through this record paddy harvest in Punjab. And we used to charge 3% a tax from the FCI or whoever was buying, which was called the Rural Development Fee, which goes on to fund our rural infrastructure. You'll have to believe me that they have withheld that money. In the cost sheet of the FCI, they put this as zero. And for the last 1 month, I have not been able to get an appointment with the Food Minister of India. And he, he said that unless you settle this farm thing, we are not going to give you the money. This is the kind of arm twisting which goes on. And this is a sizable amount, it's 1,200 crores. The United Arab Emirates is putting up 3 large food parks in India. And they were obviously very keen to have one food park in Punjab. If nothing, for nothing, just the name Punjab itself, just the name is sufficient to bring a food park to. And because Government of India has to allot them, one has gone to Gujarat, obviously, the second to Madhya Pradesh, and the third to Maharashtra. Then another project which was coming up was the pharmaceutical park, and there were 3 bulk drug parks. Punjab was actually the front runner, but I'm actually scared that they're going to bump us off just because of this, and they're going to give one to Gujarat and one to UP and one to Himachal, I think. So, unless you wean away people from agriculture, from Punjab, and try and, industrialize Punjab, because we could not industrialize because we never mounted a serious public relation exercise in the last 40 years, thinking that, this food security is part of the national duty. So we wouldn't mind being relieved of this national duty if our children could be given alternative employment. And when I go to the Delhi airport, my heart breaks when I see young people from Punjab. The airport is usually full of people who want to emigrate out of Punjab, and some of them to the Middle East. And I see their mothers and the parents come sitting on the curb at the Delhi airport. Young people trying to make a living just because Punjab could not, or the country could not, give them alternative employment. And I would actually like to say in this show, there's a proverb in Punjabi which says that dosti mein, dushmani mein, और आशकी में इंसान का दिल तो बड़ा ही होना चाहिए, दिल छोटा नहीं होना चाहिए. What I've seen in the last 3 or 4 years with the Government of India, somehow the heart is not big enough. We are not looking for Punjab is not looking for any payback for what we've done. This is how the Punjabi is. But why would you? We would want to actually have India grow. We want to be part of the success story. Punjab has, contributed a lot to, the progress of India. We see some blank pages still, and which can be written by Punjab. And even when people talk about the Kashmir problem and how do we solve the Kashmir problem, Manish ji, my considered view is that if India continues to grow at 7 or 8% every year, if the GDP of India continues to grow at 6, 7, 8%, Pakistan is growing at 3% or 2%, within 20 years, Kashmir problem would have solved by itself. And, Punjabi farmers, we are not, Punjab is not where people are just dying to just grow wheat and rice. If it's the children of the same farmers who have, saved the Italian cheese industry, the Argentinian groundnut industry, the Californian nuts and grapes, just if there is an alternative, they'll be very happy to switch. They're the first people who will switch. So, my considered view is that somehow Government of India should show a larger heart. The transition cannot be abrupt. It can only be organic. And if sufficient investments are directed towards Punjab, and which rightfully belong to Punjab, I don't see a single central project after the rail coach factory in Kapurthala, which has come down to Punjab. And Punjab deserves, I think, better. But at the same time, I have no qualms in admitting that maybe there is some failure on the Punjabi leadership. We had such a big head start in 47, in 62. We have had hiccups. Pakistan was trying to destabilize. If I remember correctly, in 1973, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto had a meeting with all the editors of the Pakistani press. And he said, we are going to take revenge from India for what they did in 1971 in Bangladesh. They call it Sakut-e-Dhaka. That the revenge will take place in Punjab. And that is when Punjab was destabilized, of course, by a foreign power. We don't, and it was the pain which Punjab suffered in terms of civilians killed, policemen martyred, civil servants killed. Punjab has paid actually a huge price. And if you look at from, even in the partition of India, India was not partitioned. Bengal was partitioned. Punjab was partitioned. 1 million people actually died on both sides of the border. And barely had we got a decade, Punjab, in barely a decade from 1947, we had built the Bhakra Dam, we had built Chandigarh, we had built the Punjab Agriculture University, we had, got electricity to our villages, roads, engineering colleges. And between 62 and, 65, then 71, barely had Punjab come out of, this tailspin that General Zia and the ISI chief at that time, I think the man from Patiala, his name was, I think, Abdul Akhtar Rahman Khan. He was from Patiala, and his family had been killed in Patiala during the riots. So with these two people, the kind of vengeance they took on Punjab, and it wasn't until 1988 when the senior president Bush, who came and actually gave out the American policy that we will not allow balkanization of India. And barely had we come out of the tailspin of terrorism that special concessions were given to some of our immediate neighbors. Barely had we come out of that the GST, again, 25% of states' revenues was subsumed in the GST. So I think overall, the farmers of Punjab need to be given a chance. Everybody deserves a second chance. We're not asking for charity, but I think if one chance can be given, a transition, and as I said, it can't be abrupt, it has to be organic. And if people could be weaned away from agriculture so that dependence on agriculture goes, we'd be very happy. Manish, you'll have to believe me because I'm a Kisan. We have 5 months of the year in which we don't get any fungus on any of our crops, and we don't have any pest attack on right from October till March. Punjab could actually be developed not only as a state which grows vegetables, not for India, but for the rest of the world. And what are called winter vegetables in India are actually summer vegetables for the rest of the world. So entire Central Asia, entire Russia, even parts of Middle East and Afghanistan, they're covered in a sheet of snow.
Manpreet, will have to go across to Gul now, so therefore
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So thank you very much.
No, I just wanted to add on a question to what Manpreet ji had just elaborated. So far we've really talked about the implications of the farm bills on Punjab and our neighboring states, which contribute heavily to the armed forces. But the fact is that rest of India also has an agrarian character. You have people across the length and breadth of this country who really depend upon agriculture for their livelihood. We have been trying for a very, very long time to change the structure of the Indian economy. But despite the Indian economy having grown, at about 8% between 2004 and 14, and even, at a fairly rapid rate between 1991, when we introduced liberalization, all the way up till 2004, the structure of the Indian economy really has not changed in terms of the number of people who depend upon agriculture for their livelihood. Similarly, the recruitment pattern in the Indian armed forces has also not changed substantially ever since 1947, or even if you were to go back in time. And even today, rural India, agrarian India contributes disproportionately to India's armed forces. So therefore, Gulji, do you think that beyond the region that we live in, that we are concerned with, we are also obsessed with its progress, these farm laws are going to have a wider implication on other people across the length and breadth of the country? And if that is so, why are those people also not standing up and protesting? Is it because there is a lack of appreciation about the implications of these bills? Or is it just that it is a matter of time?
Thank you, Manishji. I think the one thing that really stands out in what you just said was that, among other things, of course, was that a significant part of rural India continues to send a large proportion of people to the armed forces, and urban India doesn't quite contribute at par. Now, that therein, I think, lies a very, very interesting aspect of our culture and of our country. The responsibility and the honor with which the armed forces are viewed in rural India is very different from the way the armed forces are viewed in urban India. And for the purpose of this discussion, to tie it to agriculture, I think it would not be far-fetched to draw the conclusion that agriculturalists, by and large, value the armed forces more than, say, people from the urban parts of this country. And there are two reasons for that. One, as Mr. Badal so eloquently articulated, he's somebody I have looked up to and interacted with briefly in the past as well. But he has summed it up perfectly, that because of two reasons. One, because there is a genuine sentiment which is pro-armed forces, which stems from honor and being rooted to the soil. And sons of soil being rooted to the soil, all these sentiments send these large numbers of people to the armed forces. And secondly, for lack of opportunity. Now, again, sort of at the risk of repeating what Mr. Badal has already said, the opportunity that's available for the youth of rural India, apart from continuing to work on their farms and seek out a better life, which is the armed forces, there really isn't that much opportunity. And again, the armed forces literally come to their doorsteps through the branch recruitment offices that are there across districts and areas that heavily contribute. Now, I think it's pretty clear that no farmer's father wants him to be a farmer either. But it's because of the fact that we lack any other skills by design or default that we end up remaining in agriculture, those people who are still in agriculture and those who perhaps been forced to continue with agriculture because they couldn't do anything else. Now, with regard to the ramifications of the overall crossroad of this Jai Jawan Jai Kisan space that we're finding ourselves at as a result of the three farm laws that have brought this conversation back into focus, I think there's two parts to it. The first part is that in the northern part, and I'm being very specific when I say that, I mean Punjab and Haryana, essentially have agriculture that's for want of a better term, more developed. So there's a kind of agriculture that's pursued here in Punjab and in Haryana that is not very similar to the kind of agriculture that's pursued in other parts of the country. For example, the capital intensive manner in which we go with agriculture in Punjab and Haryana, be it irrigation through tube wells, perhaps watering water intensive crops that we shouldn't be growing in the first place, but that's a different conversation. Or poisoning our soils the way we are through the amount of pesticide and fertilizer that goes into it. But essentially, it's also because there was a sustained focus to increase our food grain production, and that food grain production was incentivized, and therefore these two states delivered. And of course, Punjab was the granary of the country. Now that we no longer need that role to be fulfilled, it would seem that Punjab has met its purpose and what it was meant for. So it doesn't really matter. Let's take away their incentive to grow what they were growing without perhaps giving them an alternative. I think there's a lot more stuff that Punjab can grow if it was adequately incentivized, and it can be done. And again, Mr. Badal would probably have more to share on that. So I think Punjab would be very open to reforming their agriculture, not just because they're also caught in this paddy wheat cycle, but because every farmer today is aware of the damage that they're doing to the soil because of the excessive, if I can use that word, use of fertilizer and pesticide, the damage to our topsoil, and not to mention the amount of groundwater the cultivation of paddy is taking. We would welcome a change in Punjab, and I say that as a farmer myself. But we would need to be handheld through for that. I don't think that's something that can happen automatically. On the other point of how these laws impact the rest of the farming community in the country, there are two parts, Manishji. The first part is that agriculture isn't looked at in a lot of other parts of the country the way it is done in Punjab and Haryana. Again, and that is a very interesting historical context. The annexation of the Punjab was the last annexation of a state, princely state, so to speak. Not that it was one state, but I'm referring here to Maharaja Ranjit Singh's Punjab. Was literally the last annexation to take place, and by then the way the British viewed agriculture had also dramatically changed from the way they viewed agriculture. When Bengal was annexed, and how the manner in which the agriculture was therefore developed in these respective states. So it's interesting to note that the development of agriculture in the last few decades of the British Empire, and the timing of the annexation of agrarian states dictates to a large extent the kind of agricultural practices that were adopted. At the time of the annexation of Bengal, for example, and eastern states of India, there was a feudal approach to agriculture, which was what was prevalent in the United Kingdom at the time. But by the time the Punjab was annexed, there had been a significant shift towards industrialization in Europe. And that somewhere impacted the manner in which agriculture was approached. Which is why you see a distinctive manner of the Punjab, Haryana, maybe we were all the same till these Pepsu was broken up, which is why our approach to agriculture, its presence in our culture is different from, say, other parts of the country. Of course, now Madhya Pradesh has been fast catching up with the kind of produce that Punjab comes up, especially with regard to wheat. But coming back again to why agriculture has been differently carried out in other parts of the country as compared to Punjab and Haryana, which see heavy use of tractors, machinery, and irrigation from tube wells. The other thing is that while the right to protest may be enshrined in our constitution and it is at the heart of our democracy, what's interesting to also note is there are multiple obstacles that can be placed in the path of the right to exercise your right to protest by the state machinery. So states where there is a government which is an opposition government, for want of a better term, have seen greater outpouring of protest against these laws than states which have, say, a government which is belonging to the same party or in coalition with the ruling party in the center. And that tells us something in the manner in which the meat of the laws has been communicated to the farmers and their right to protest and dissent and how it's been exercised. So my sense is that the other states are also impacted by these laws, Manishji, as you pointed out, given that a large part of our country is agrarian. But the impact on those states and the farmers and their sort of disruption of the normal course of things through protest has perhaps been undermined. But just to say that, it's not that, there was Madhya Pradesh has an interesting history of farmer protests. In fact, it was in I think in 2017, in the course of a farm protest under a BJP government, that 5 farmers were shot dead. 5 farmers were shot dead in police firing in the course of a protest. So there have been belligerent farmers who've continued to protest even without support or without being given that platform or allowed that platform by the government, as we have seen from the farmers of Haryana. But to summarize, I would simply just say that agriculture is approached differently in different parts of the country from a cultural standpoint and the manner in which it's been carried out. And B, the ability to protest and dissent against these laws has been amplified as a result of having governments that have given space to the protest. But on a closing note, I do want to add that at some level, farmers pan-India have been failed by the opposition. Now, fair enough that these laws were passed by circumventing and circumnavigating legislative procedure, but it did not stop the opposition, and it's something that I have said repeatedly when I've been at the protest for over 10 days now. It did not stop the opposition from doing what the protesters are now doing instead. So essentially, at some level, the farmers have been failed twice over. Once by their ruling government, which chose to sort of make a short shrift of these laws by not following consultative process, or by creating this massive trust deficit by showing the intent that they showed, but also to some extent, and I would say to a large extent, by the opposition that should have been doing what the farmers are doing now. And because the opposition failed them, the farm unions, the Kisan unions were forced to organize like never before and do that job for themselves. So that really is my take on the lack of protest from some. I wouldn't say the lack of protest, the scale of protests against the farm laws being somewhat lesser in some states, but definitely a lot more in some states.
Gulji, you make a fair point, but since I'm playing moderator, so therefore, and debuting as an anchor, so therefore I would choose not to respond to that.
That was not meant to be a jibe at you at all. It was just in light of sort of rounding off the
but to go back to something which was said earlier, you see, herein is the classical dichotomy. So while you have rural India, which contributes overwhelmingly to our armed forces, the shrill jingle of jingoism is something which is omnipresent in urban India. So therefore, whenever you have a conflict or whenever conditions get created whereby national interest is seen to be or perceived to be challenged or is challenged in the real sense of the word, you find a quiet kind of steadiness in among those people, among those communities, which actually send their sons to the front lines. But you find a lot of high decibel jingoism from those areas which which actually do not contribut. The second thing which I just wanted to say before we go on with the discussion, you distinguished between British attitudes towards agriculture in the first annexations which they did and the subsequent annexations when they played out. But the fact is that the British attitude towards agriculture was essentially an extortionist kind of a paradigm. If you go back to China's century of humiliation from 1839 to 1949, the opium for the Opium Wars was actually extracted from India, which for all intents and purposes, at least the eastern part of India had become a British colony by 1839 itself. And the reason why they had a different standard insofar as the northern part of India is concerned, because it also played into the British forward policy, because by the time the great game had commenced and the Brits were very scared about the Soviet Union actually coming down and occupying what they considered to be their eminent domain. So I think, and given the fact that they were very heavily recruiting from these parts, they obviously couldn't have shown the kind of insensitivity which they had shown earlier, which also ultimately was responsible for not one but three famines playing themselves out in Bengal. The thing which I wanted to really ask Manpreet ji, and maybe that would be a good point to conclude this discussion, is it's been 25 days that the farmers have been camping on the borders of Delhi. Where do we go from here? Because eventually it does not seem that the union government is sensitive to the concerns of the farmers. And I think they are really playing them by stretching out these negotiations. It's the classical filibuster in the American sense of the word, that you keep talking for the sake of talking. So, with your vast experience in administration, in political activism, Manpreet ji, may I ask you that where are we headed? Because eventually, you have a situation whereby people are legitimately protesting for what they think, undermines not only their social safety net, but the raison d'etre of their existence. And you have a government which, for reasons which I have elaborated earlier, both of you have elaborated, refuses to budge. So my question to both of you, one by one, would be that where do we go from here? Manpreet ji, over to you.
Thank you, Manish. My considered view, Manish, that how to end this, at least would be, and if I, was part of the government, I may be a very strong individual, but if I've hurt my knee, then I'm sick. If my eye is paining, I will be sick. So any part of India, I'm not just talking about Punjab or even the peasants or the farmers of Punjab, but what is India? India is the sum total of its states. So if any state is stressed, either internally or externally, I think government is like a my baap. जैसे माई बाप को फिक्र होता है अपने औलाद का, this is how governments are. And if I think the best way for the government of India would be to suspend or put in abeyance these laws for the next 6 months. And if they feel that these are so good for the farmer, actually somebody who wears a shoe knows where it pinches. It's very difficult for somebody else to say where is the shoe pinching from. But if they can actually hold it in abeyance for 6 months, let the government have a rethink, let the farmers have a rethink, and let them explain it to the farmers why they are so good for you. But for 6 months, I think they should just call it a draw. And if they can do it, and this is, I don't think so they should be hard-headed or pig-headed to trying to, just thrust these. Manisha, my son is now 4th generation growing up in Punjab since partition. And the wounds of 1947, they still refuse to go away. He feels the pain as much as, my generation or my father's generation have felt. The kind of politics which is taking place in India, and I'm sorry, I'm digressing a little bit from your question, this kind of divisive politics, we have paid a very, very heavy price. We don't want the rest of India to go down that road or pay that price, which we or our ancestors have paid. And, as I said earlier, that, it doesn't sometimes you have to be generous, or give the other person a chance to succeed. I think if government of India were to rethink and not hold on to prestige or ego, I think, in Punjabi, there's a saying that प्यार से तो आप पंजाबी की जान भी ले लो, वो जान दे देगा, बट आप ये कानून का झांसा मत दो उस पंजाबी को, this कानून is actually good for you. You know, the farmer actually has seen through this. And when you ask that why are the protests so, shrill in Punjab and maybe the rest of India, they don't seem to be, it's just simply because people from Punjab are more aware. They have had actually a century of where farmers' organizations, from Sardar Ajit Singh and his famous tehreek called Pagadi Sambhal Jatta, to Sir Chotu Ram, who passed those historic laws for the Kisans of Punjab. So Punjab historically has been where people are aware of their rights. And earlier, Gul was talking about how feudalism was the norm in Eastern India, and how the exploitation of the peasant used to take place all the way from Bengal to UP, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan. Punjab was probably the only state in India. Obviously, we didn't suffer the colonial rule for 200 years. It was just 90 years. Also, Punjab always had the peasant cultivator. The feudalism was not present. The peasant himself was the owner of his land. So he is actually more aware of his rights. He is very proud of what he does. And being a Kisan and being it's actually a matter of honor to be serving in the military. I remember, when I first became MLA, there used to be, people used to come seeking for favors. And one of the favors would be that, why don't you help us get our son in the military? And I used to ask them, obviously, a question that, is he fit to go in the military? And one of the expressions, Manish, you probably wouldn't have heard, they would say, Ji, wo to Nicholsonia Jawan hai. There used to be one commander of the Punjab military in 1857, John Nicholson. And he was big and brave and tough and all. He was Nicholsonia Jawan. He's like Nicholson, And going back a little bit, you wouldn't believe it that initially, when the British started recruiting, so children from good families would join the military, take their own horse, take their own sais, take their own lance, and not be expecting any salary, but just to serve the military. That is the kind of honor in serving the military for these Kisan or peasant cultivators of Punjab. And also, and this honor of respecting an enemy, I just, I don't want to be long-winded. I am a little long-winded though. I remember this in 1971 because we've just been through the Vijay, the victory over Pakistan a few days back. That when the GOC&C of the Pakistani military, General A.A.K. Niazi, when he signed the instrument of surrender to his Indian counterpart, General Arora, he asked him two questions. One was, are you going to handcuff me? And General Arora said, of course not. We'll go together, we'll have a drink in the mess, and, we're old friends. And the last thing I want to do is to handcuff you. And the second question which General Niazi asked his Indian counterpart was that, can I be guarded by the Rajput regiment? Because he was formerly with the Rajputs, and the Rajputs had given him a name. They used to not call him Niazi, but they used to call him Amar Singh Rathod. That was an honorary name given to General Niazi when he was a young major in the Indian Army. So, this kind of ethos, this kind of sentimentality, this kind of honor which springs from, the farmer, soldier families. This has, we have done India proud in the past. We hope to carry on this tradition in our generation. And we hope that we can inculcate these values in our children and in our grandchildren yet to come, to serve India with honor, with pride, and be, the torchbearers of a new India. I hope Punjab and its surrounding states, all of us put together, we will live to see a day when India has more inclusive laws and conducts more inclusive politics in India. Thank you.
Thank you, Manpreet. Before I come to Gulji, there's one thing which I would like to say. We have a certain understanding of the farm laws and its implications where we live. However, there seems to be a completely different understanding of the farm laws in various other parts of the country. I have been talking to, trying to convince people that why these farm laws are destructive, subversive of India's national security. But I find a completely different perspective, even among extremely enlightened sections of our citizenry in various other parts of India. I think there is a need to have a more concerted outreach to try and explain as to why for 25 days in this bitter cold, when there is an abject cold wave sweeping over North India, people are camping out in the open. So I think the point which Agulji was making earlier, people who sympathize, people who support the farmers' cause, who understand their pain and where they are coming from, I think need to make a greater effort to try and reach out to people across the country and really explain our point of view, because I'm quite surprised that what should be obvious is obviously not obvious. And so therefore, Gulji, back to you for the final word.
Thank you, Manishji. When my first day at the Singhu border protest about 2 weeks ago, in fact, I had also bought the media narrative that this is largely a Punjab protest. And there are, obviously Sikhs are more prominent given the turban, and you tend to spot them much quicker. And I had bought this narrative that there are a huge number of people from Punjab at this protest. Now, being from Fatehgarh Sahib, which is a stone's throw away from both Chandigarh and your constituency, Manishji, I had witnessed the unions galvanizing people even as early as early October. And I understood, okay, it made some sense that it would be largely these people at the protest. But the first lot of farmers I actually met with were from Haryana. And then I met with people from Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan. And of course, not to deny that there were a significant number of people from Punjab. But that also is largely on account of the fighting spirit of the Punjabi. And also the Punjabi and the cultural ability to organize logistics, at the heart of which is the langar. The reason these protests are continuing and are being supported in the manner that they are being supported is because we have a culture of camping out. We do that for all our melas. We, in fact, do it 3-4 times a year, be it Muksar Sahib, be it Fatehgarh Sahib Jod Mela, be it Shahid Mela again in the month of May. So we are used to doing this. And people open their hearts and their kitchens and set up langars. So logistically, this has been very, very well supported. Now, there's also been a disconnect in the manner in which the mainstream media, Manishji, has reported these protests and the manner in which they're actually playing out on ground. There is a significant number of people at the UP borders also protesting. There are people back home in UP who are protesting, but given the situation in UP and the lack of tolerance for people to express their right to protest, perhaps has something to do with why they're not turning out in the large numbers that they ought to be turning out, and also because they lack the organizational capability of the Punjab farmer. So there are a lot of people on ground, and my time at the protest over the last 2 weeks has actually brought me face to face with farmers from all over the country. So I think there's little doubt in the fact that farmers from across India are. But let's also acknowledge that the massive attempts of outreach that are being done by the ruling government to try and convince people how these laws are actually very good for the farmer is also playing its part. Now, let's look at what these protests have achieved. These protests of farmers and soldiers, because so many people in the protesting farmers are actually retired soldiers from various forces, be it the BSF, CRPF, and of course the 3 Indian Armed Forces. Now, for the first time, we've seen a public protest of this scale cut across caste and religion, which is something I think to be really spoken for, because this kind of unity we haven't seen before. Despite there being concerted attempts to divide farmers across regions, by Haryana farmer, and Rajasthan farmer, and Madhya Pradesh farmer, and UP farmer, and Punjab farmer. So those attempts have actually failed because the farm union leaders have managed to hold this protest together. And what they've also done, and for good reason, is to keep political parties at bay, and allowed the protest to some extent to remain, to a large extent, to remain pure. Now, it's difficult for the government to turn down, because the principle of administration is that the government must not surrender under pressure, because it will open multiple other fronts for them and weaken their position going forward. And it's unlikely that we are going to see the kind of a result that the farmers are asking for in this present moment. So I would agree with Mr. Badal when he says that the best case scenario right now is for the Supreme Court to show to match the intent that it's shown with intervention, which says that these laws must be kept in abeyance and their enforcement stayed till the committee gives its recommendation. And again, on the committee, it's really important to bring all stakeholders back on board, which means not just the farmers and agriculturalists, agricultural scientists and agricultural economists, but also the corporations, because a large part of what the farmer feels is that this is being done to benefit big corporations. And ultimately, there have to be confidence building measures, because Manishji, what my time at the protest has clearly demonstrated is that there is a huge trust deficit that exists between the farmer and the government, on part of the farmer feeling that the government does not have its intent in the right place. And that's been demonstrated again and again in two ways. Largely in the manner in which the bills were passed, first as an ordinance and then rushed through Parliament in September. And then the manner in which every attempt has been made by unofficial spokespersons of the government to label these protests, to subvert them, to discredit them, and to malign them. And the duplicity with which it appears, and the duplicity which is perceived of the government's actions, because you have union ministers labeling these protests as anti-national and as elements of terrorist organizations hijacking it, while at the same time the union agriculture minister writes this letter to the farming community protesting. So are you now having a conversation with people you are alleging to be terrorists? So there is this duplicitous stand that has been taken repeatedly by the government in negotiating and reaching out to the farmers, which is why there is a huge trust deficit. So the way forward, the way I see it, is to agree with what Mr. Badal has said, but I honestly don't see these farmers going back home anytime soon. And it's really cold, temperatures dropping below 6 degrees, and they're continuing to camp out in their trolleys. And I really don't see them going back. And I also don't see the government yielding. So it's a bit of an impasse and an uncomfortable one, especially for the farmer and his family that are actually now camping out across on all borders of Delhi. So it's an unfortunate situation, and the urban folks who are particularly insensitive to the plight of the farmer perhaps need to pay a visit to the protest to try and understand what this is about, because this isn't really far away. This is happening right at the doorstep of the national capital region.
Gulwal, I take.
Rishi, can I come in for a second?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Manish, one of my heroes in history is Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the founder of modern Turkey. And many years back, when I was a teenager, I read his autobiography. And he recalls an incident where Mustafa Kemal was a young major. He was posted as a military attaché to to a country called Hungary, and the capital city was Budapest. And in his autobiography, he mentions that one evening I was in my uniform with all my medals, and I went out to dine in a restaurant, in a very upscale restaurant in Budapest. Budapest is a very beautiful city. And he said, while I was having my dinner, a peasant walked into the restaurant. He was dressed in a very shabby manner, and his boots had mud on them. And he sat down on a table next to me. And the manager of the restaurant, came along and he whispered in his ear. He said, "Excuse me, sir, this is a very fine dining facility, and we really don't encourage people like you to come and dine over here. So could you kindly leave?" And Mustafa Kemal said, "Well, I was having my dinner, but my attention and my ears were towards what was happening on the next table." And this is recorded by Mustafa Kemal. And he said, what the peasant said to the manager, had a deep impression on me, made a deep impression on me. And the peasant said, "Listen, I am a farmer and I grow food for Hungary. And my son is a soldier and he's defending the borders of my country. I have every right to sit on this table, on this high table, and dine here. And you cannot ask me to leave." I think this would be a correct analogy for the situation. I think the farmers have every right to protest over there. And maybe the government, as a government, must listen to them. And you can't take away that right. And you can't, try and divide the movement. And I must give it to the Kisans of Haryana. And again, a people-led movement. The kind of generosity which they have shown towards their, brethren from Punjab, I think it's almost makes me emotional when I see these two set of Kisans sitting together, sharing their food. And I've known families in Haryana, and I've known personally where they have, maybe their own children may not have got the milk and, this kind of sweets, but which they are actually donating or just giving away, as charity to the people of or Kisans of Punjab. And through this, and in a very responsible fashion, not only want to thank the Haryanvis, but also as a minister in the government of Punjab, would say that we will try and reciprocate one day for what you have shown. Believe me, there are young people from my district who are telling me, that it's you people, the netas and the leaders who divided us. And there's actually a movement, or at least a thinking of joining Punjab and Haryana together again. They said the next movement would be to create what is called a Maha Punjab. Thank you.
No, while I absolutely take your point about the spirit at the Dharna site and the fact that the farmers have been sitting together, people have been expressing solidarity with them. But in my own limited experience as a political activist, someone who had organized and led the movement which had led to the downfall of the VP Singh government way back in 1990, may I very respectfully say that it is perhaps not a good idea to keep the politicians out. Because till the time a movement does not get a critical amount of political support, unfortunately, governments are able to ride roughshod over these movements. And the reason why politicians have been keeping out is because we did not want to disrespect the sentiments of the farmer unions by attempting to, in any manner, hijack what is their protest. But as we enter the 25th day of the dharna on the borders of Delhi. And as we head into possibly the coldest season that this region experiences over the next 2 months, I would like to use this forum to urge the farmer unions to broaden their support base and allow all those people who have the conviction of courage and who do believe in their cause to legitimately come and participate in the movement. But thank you very much, Mr. Badal. Thank you very much, Gulpanag-ji, for sparing your time and being with us at the Military Literature Festival. It was absolutely a pleasure and a delight listening to both of you. Thank you very much and have a good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having
Thank you,
me.
Manish. And congratulations on your debut as a moderator.
Thanks.
Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Can we switch it off?